Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our Wisconsin Citizen Climate Education Training on the Wisconsin primary phone script for Get Out the Vote. I am so excited to be here with you today by video. My name is Brandon Keating, and I've been having an amazing time supporting volunteers like you in engaging climate voters with citizen climate education in Wisconsin. So the first thing I want you to know, if you don't already, is that calling people over the phone to engage them about the election is one of the most powerful things that we can do to impact voter behavior. And we have a script that I'm going to share with you today that is chock-a-block full of tested elements that help make sure that your phone calls are as impactful as they can possibly be. So what I'm going to be doing in this short video is walking through that script step by step to give you kind of the behind the curtain on why is each element actually there in the script and why are they all there together. This script is modeled off of one that I created in the past and was tested in a randomized controlled trial in order to have a significant, shown that it had a significant impact on voter turnout. 5 points overall of increasing turnout, 10 points for the lowest likely voters to vote, and 13 points with Hispanic voters. So it's not just the individual elements that make the script work, it's that we have them all together in this one script. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and share out my screen. But before I do, I also want to let you know who is it that we are actually talking to in these phone calls. We are going to be talking with voters that have a propensity to be climate change, environmental supporters. So that means that based on previous interactions that they might have had with home bankers like you, or based on their vote history and consumer data, that they have a propensity to be environmental supporters. And they also have a sporadic vote history. So they haven't been voting every single time. And so that means that they're likely to be responsive to our engagement around climate and the natural world and the environment, and that in the absence of a conversation, they might not go out and vote. So that's why your work on these phone calls as somebody who is supporting the environment and climate change and talking about voting is going to be extra impactful and play a really special role with these particular people. It's also why we want to make sure that we talk to only those voters who are actually on the list. This whole program is designed to use your time really efficiently and effectively. And so we know if the voter is on the list that they meet that criteria that I just described, that's going to make the conversation really purposeful and effective. But if they're not on the list, then we don't know. So we want to make sure that we use our time well by talking with those voters that meet that criteria. So here is the script. The beginning of the script is pretty straightforward. You're just introducing yourself. Now, even though we're going to be on the phone and folks aren't going to see us, it's actually really helpful to kind of get yourself in a frame of mind where you are actually smiling and you are like talking to an old pal. That person is going to hear that over the phone in your demeanor, and that's going to help keep them in the conversation with you. Sometimes it's really tempting to try to sound super official. However, people aren't generally super excited by being called by bureaucrats and people that maybe sound a little bit more robotic. So we want to kind of sound just friendly and like ourselves, like we were just talking to an old friend, and whatever that means for you in your personality and in your style. So we're going to first greet folks. Hello. This is Brandon with Wisconsin Citizens Climate Education, calling for, and then you're going to say the voter's name that's on your list and ask if they're available. And once you get that voter on the phone, we're going to let them know that we are talking with Wisconsin voters like you who care about our natural world because there's a lot at stake for our environment in the elections this year, and ask them, are you planning to vote in the August 13th primary? So already with this first paragraph, we're looking at one of the elements of the script that helps ensure that we have an impact. When we say we're talking with voters like you who care about our natural world, that's called identity framing. So that's setting up right from the beginning, connecting with the identity that the voter has as somebody who cares about the environment, cares about the natural world, and bringing that into this conversation. So there are a few different responses that you may receive. The person might not know that there's an election coming. So they might say, what election? They might say yes, they might say maybe, they might say no. Now, when you do this with the Hub Dialer tool and you make a selection, it's going to automatically take you to the right part of the script. You're not going to have to scroll like you're going to see me do on screen. This is just for demonstration. And if you don't already know how to use Hub Dialer, that will be part of the training that you will receive as well. Okay, so if the person says, what election, then we go to this next spot right here. And we let folks know it's easy to forget about primary elections, especially while they're in the summer. On August 13th, you get to vote on which candidates for Congress and for the Wisconsin legislature will be on the ballot, and to vote yes or no on 2 proposed amendments to the state constitution. And so now we're going to ask them again, do you think that you will vote in the primary election on August 13th? And now the way that this is stated, it's easy to forget about primary elections, especially when they're in the summer, is important, right? We don't want somebody to feel embarrassed or to feel like we're telling them to do something that they weren't already going to do. That can create a backlash effect. So we want to just be really welcoming and accepting and let them know, oh yeah, it's easy to forget about these elections. So that's why that's worded that way. And then we're giving them the information that they need to continue through the conversation. And so if they had said, on the other hand, yes, that they were voting, we would have said, great, there are a lot of reasons people like you and I vote. What's particularly motivating you to vote in this election? And then we're going to list some things that might be motivating people. So no matter which branch you go down, whether it's what election, whether it's maybe, or whether it's yes, we are going to end up in this part where we ask, what is their motivation for voting? This is a super important part of the script. When we are asking this question, what is motivating them? We are encouraging what social psychologists call active processing. That means the effortful consideration of information. We're changing it from a one-way conversation about why someone might vote. We're not just telling them why someone might vote, to a two-way conversation about why to vote. And that encourages self-persuasion for voting. So if they were a yes, that might reinforce that yes. If they were a maybe, it might change that maybe. And if they were a no, it might change that no. So we want to be sure and ask them, what's particularly motivating you? The environment? Is it the state constitutional amendments? Is it that you might want to shape our state legislature for our democracy, or something else? And then they will respond. And we're going to say, okay, great. That's a really important reason to vote. We know lots of people in your area are voting this year. So again, this is an element that is here for a very specific reason. We know lots of people in your area are voting this year is not a throwaway line. That line is there because it turns out that people who don't vote every time, sporadic or lower propensity voters, are encouraged to vote by the sort of everybody's doing it, get on the bandwagon type of message. So a lot of times as activists, we're motivated by something else. We're motivated maybe by nobody's voting, or there aren't going to be enough people voting, or it's going to be really close, right? Those are the kind of things that tend to motivate folks who are more activist minded, maybe like me, maybe like you. However, for our lower propensity and our sporadic voters, that is not a resonant message. In fact, the opposite is true. We want to emphasize high turnout. We want to emphasize that voting is easy. We want to emphasize that they do have enough information. So that line is there for that reason. We know lots of people in your area are voting this year. And the next piece then is the education and commitment. So again, we want to make sure that folks know that voting is easy, that they do have enough information and there are places to go get information that are accessible to them. And we're going to quickly then walk them through not only the education part, but also in the commitment part, but also making a plan to vote. So these are three different elements: education, making sure they have the information; commitment, we're going to ask them for a commitment to vote; and making a plan. The commitment to vote has been tested to yield between a 1.5 and a 5% increase in voter turnout, depending on whether that's on the phone, in person, and whether we send a reminder back to them. So that's why the commitment is there. And then we're also going to ask them some planning questions, because it turns out that when you walk people through their plan to vote, where are they going? How are they voting? What time are they going to bring a friend, etc. When we walk them through their plan to vote, that also increases voter turnout. So there's a bunch woven in this next portion in order to help, again, increase that probability that they'll go vote. So we're going to ask, do you plan to vote in person, by absentee mail, or early at the clerk's office? If it's in person, we're going to let them know when the polls open and when they close. And we're also going to give them this website, myvote.wi.gov, to make sure they know where their polling place is. If they're voting absentee or at the clerk's office, we're going to let them know that if they have any questions, they can also go to that same website. So they can get that information quickly, easily, and at their fingertips. We also want to make sure that they know about the two important constitutional amendments on the ballot. So we have a nice descriptive paragraph here about them, letting the voter know that those two amendments could delay or eliminate all kinds of federally funded programs, including emergency and disaster assistance, healthcare, transportation, renewable energy, and pollution programs. That this is because they shift control of the funds from the governor to the state legislature, meaning more lengthy and complex processes. And again, we want to make sure they can get that information at their fingertips. And so we have another website here on the script, my.lwv.org/Wisconsin. And then we're going to let them know Talking with You is part of our statewide campaign to increase voter participation in Wisconsin, and that we believe that when more people vote, our government is more fully representative of the people. So thank you for your commitment to vote. That thanking them, that reinforcing the commitment to vote, thank you for being a voter, thank you for your commitment to vote, that's an important piece right there. And then here is where we want to make sure that we try and get the ability to remind them of their commitment, because again, that reminder adds increase of likelihood to vote, another tested tactic. So we're going to ask them, can we text you a reminder the day before the election? If they say yes, we're going to ask them, is this your cell number? If they say no, we're going to ask for their phone number, physically write it down, read it back to them to make sure that we got it right, and then send that and their name to the host or email it right away. So if you're at a hosted phone bank, you can give it to the host. And if not, you should email it right away to this email address that will show on your hub dialer screen, cclwisco@gmail.com. So that'll be right in front of you. And then if they had said no to the text, you would just go straight to the closing. Otherwise, we've arrived to the closing now. Thank you for participating in the upcoming election. So thank you for participating. Thank you for being a voter, and have a good evening. So we'll go now quickly through the maybe. You'll see it's pretty much structured exactly the same, but we have a little bit of a different opening here at the beginning. So if they say maybe and they give a reason they might not vote, maybe, but I'm pretty frustrated with how our elected officials have been behaving, and I don't think it's going to make a difference. That might be something you could hear, right? And so if we hear a frustration, we're going to validate that frustration so that we avoid backlash effect, right? So we're going to say many voters are frustrated too. I get frustrated sometimes myself. One reason I'm voting anyway is, and then you're going to include a personal reason that you are voting. So here, it can be very tempting for those of us who care a lot about what is happening in the election and who care enough to call voters. It can be very tempting to just jump, if somebody says no or maybe, just jump into all the reasons that are important to vote. And we might jump into facts and figures. We want to kind of resist the urge to do that, because that can create that backlash effect that we mentioned before. It can put the voter on the defensive. So we're going to kind of take a deep breath, resist that urge to give them all the important facts, figures, and reasons. And instead, we're going to first use that validating phrase. Many voters are frustrated too. And then we're going to talk at a personal level, not about facts and figures that are out there, not about talking points that we've heard on TV or read, but personal. I get frustrated sometimes myself. One reason I'm voting anyway is, and then you can mention a reason ideally related to climate that is important to you personally at a personal level. And then we go back to sort of the rest of the flow of the script that we just went through in the yes section, going through that active processing about the different reasons a person might vote if they do, through the education and commitment and the planning questions to the closing. If they had said no, we are going to still go through some of these pieces, and we're going to start with that piece that I mentioned about the large turnout. Okay, we expect that many people in your area are planning to vote. Can I ask why you're not planning to vote this year? And so then we're going to go to that part that we just went through about acknowledging the frustrations. Okay, I understand that you are frustrated because our elected officials don't seem to have been following through as much as we might like. Many voters are frustrated too. I get frustrated sometimes myself. one reason I'm voting anyway is, right? So we're going back through that validation, personalization, and we're in a back and forth that is encouraging active processing. And then letting them know, in case you decide to later vote, the primary election is August 13th, and giving them the times that the polls are open, where they can find their polling place, and opening up any questions. We will have an FAQ support sheet for you. So that is something that will be a resource for you that you can use for questions that people might ask. And then the remainder here is the same, talking with you as part of our statewide campaign to increase voter participation in Wisconsin, because we really believe that when people vote, our government is more fully representative of the people. If they still remain a firm no, then you jump to the closing. If they move to a maybe or a yes, then we're going to ask them if we can send them that text reminder and go through that same process. Okay, so that is the entirety of our script. Those are the reasons all of the puzzle pieces are there. And we thank you so much for taking your most precious resource, your time, and focusing it on making a difference in this election, and can't wait to hear how your calls went.